General Assembly Resolution 75/201 and Security Council Resolution 2558 adopted in 2020. It is intended to contribute to the high-level meeting of the General Assembly on peace building financing, which is scheduled to be held on the 27th of April, a month from now. I thank you, Secretary General, for joining us today despite your busy schedule. We have been waiting to have this meeting with you as we prepare for the upcoming high-level meeting on peace building financing next month. Excellencies, in the face of ongoing conflicts, deadly terrorist attacks, protracted humanitarian crisis, and other such challenges in many parts of the world, made worse by the pandemic, the work of the PBC has assumed more relevance than ever. There is increasing number of requests from member states to engage with the PBC on a range of issues, and the PBC's credibility lies in its ability to respond to these requests in a timely manner. I'm happy that this year's program of work provides a very good foundation for the PBC to do that. Mr. Secretary General, the program of work was developed through a consultative process, and it focuses on specific areas of action, both country-specific and thematic areas that aim at making the Commission more impactful and result-oriented. And I'm grateful to all members of the PBC and the countries under the Commission's consideration for their constructive engagement throughout this process. Excellencies, while we have an ambitious and relatively predictable program of work this year, we cannot perhaps ignore the most urgent challenge that PBC continues to face, which is financing. And I thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for consistently highlighting that in your reports on peace building and sustaining peace. And member states have also recognized this challenge in the twin resolutions leading to the upcoming high-level meeting. In the current report before us, the Secretary General has made some concrete proposals to address the perennial funding gap and to advance adequate, predictable, and sustained financing for peace building. So without further ado, I shall request the Secretary General to take us through the proposals and share his expectations from the high-level meeting. So Secretary General, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Excellencies, I also thank you for this opportunity to discuss the report on peace building and sustaining peace. Peace is the most important task we have at the United Nations. And this Commission is critical to advancing this essential work, and I'm encouraged by your program for 2022. The problem is that our task grows larger by the day. As detailed in the report, we are facing the highest number of violent conflicts since 1945, from Yemen to Syria, Myanmar and Sudan, from Haiti to the Sahel, and on and on. And now the war in Ukraine, a catastrophe shaking the foundations of the international order, spilling across borders and causing skyrocketing food, fuel and fertilizer prices that spell disaster for developing countries. Resources are being diverted away from badly needed support to address the sharp increases in hunger and poverty resulting from COVID-19. Around the world, we are seeing military coups and seizures of power by force. A perilous sense of impunity is taking hold. On the other hand, nuclear arsenals are growing, human rights and international law are under assault, the spirit and letter of the UN Charter are being flouted, criminal and terrorist networks are fooling and profiting from divisions and conflicts, and as always, the poorest, the most vulnerable, pay the highest price. As we meet today, 1/4 of humanity lives in conflict-affected areas, 2 billion people. Last year, 84 million were forcibly displaced because of conflict, violence, and human rights violations. And this year, we estimate that at least 274 million will need humanitarian assistance. All of this is taking place at a moment of multiplying risks that are pushing peace further out of reach. Inequalities, COVID-19, climate change, cyber threats, to name just a few. Excellencies, the report and the discussion today is a call to ensure that our peace-building architecture is fit for purpose in this rapidly changing environment. This appeal is in line with my proposed new agenda for peace that places prevention and peace-building at the heart of our efforts. The report before you contains a number of examples in which the United Nations is working to advance peace and prevent conflict. From Côte d'Ivoire, where we work with communities to ease tensions following the 2020 presidential election and created conditions for an inclusive political dialogue, one that included the voices of women and young people. Conflict did not go back to Côte d'Ivoire. To Iraq, where our updated cooperation framework supported the country's COVID-19 response and programming around social cohesion, protection, and inclusion. To our regional and cross-border approaches. This includes the comprehensive development plan supporting peace in the northern countries of Central America, and includes our efforts in the Great Lakes region, where my special envoy has worked with partners like the African Union to deliver a comprehensive disarmament, demobilization, repatriation, and reintegration program. We can also point to the Peacebuilding Commission efforts to support the peace process in Papua New Guinea, Colombia, and the Central African Republic. And now our resident coordinators and country teams are working more closely together in the field, thanks to our UN reform efforts from Haiti to Myanmar to Yemen. Example after example, showing how we can build and sustain peace in countries that have known far too little of it. Excellencies, peace building works. It is a proven investment. As you know, we've developed a series of mechanisms to expand and grow the resources required to deliver. And we are making progress. For example, the Peacebuilding Fund has been steadily growing, invested $195 million last year. But we echo the Commission's concerns that we face a critical gap. The fund remains wholly dependent on voluntary contributions from a small number of donors. And meanwhile, the needs far outpace resources. Despite larger contributions, the fund has been forced to scale back allocation targets over the last 3 years. And that's why financing is a primary focus of the new report and the defining issue of next month's high-level meeting at the General Assembly. And that's why I presented a separate report to the Fifth Committee on a proposal for an annual $100 million in assessed contributions for the Peacebuilding Fund. We need to leave that meeting with member states having made concrete commitments to finance our peacebuilding work. As we prepare for these discussions, I would like to highlight 3 areas where I need your support and where I encourage member states to maintain a strong focus. First, I urge member states to implement the financing recommendations included in the report. And this includes ensuring adequate, predictable, and sustainable financing for peacebuilding, especially for the fragile transition stage of peacekeeping operations. We also need urgent investments in all the tools of prevention, including stronger early warning systems, mediation capacities, and strategic data and analytics to address hate speech and detect and avoid looming crises. We also urge member states to work with the UN system to support flexible funding for local peacebuilding programming, especially for women and young people whose needs are often overlooked. And we repeat our call for member states to devote at least 20% of their official development assistance to peacebuilding in conflict settings. Second, to support these critical investments, I encourage member states to come to April's high-level meeting with concrete solutions. I've learned of several promising initiatives, including for peacebuilding financing and investments that include the private sector. We also need to see commitment by member states for assessed contributions for peacebuilding, as assessed contributions offer the predictable and sustainable base that we need to deliver results over the long term. And third, we need member states, the UN system, IFIs, and all partners to do far more to join up our humanitarian peace and development efforts. The flames of conflict are fueled by inequality, deprivation, and underfunded systems. The report on our common agenda calls for a renewed push to ensure that all societies are focused on accelerating progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And this means urgent investments in universal health coverage, in social protection, in education, job creation, It means working to end inequalities that deny entire groups of people access to civic and economic life and the levers of decision-making. It means, finally, balancing the scales of power and participation equally for women, including as peace builders. And it means accelerated action to combat climate change and helping developing countries make the transition to green economies, and transforming our commitment to human rights from words to practice in every context. Excellencies, over the last decades, the world has spent $349 billion on peacekeeping, humanitarian relief, and refugee support. And global military expenditures rose to nearly $2 trillion in 2020. Now, we are talking about 100 million. And let's not forget that war's greatest cost is its human toll. Countless innocent lives lost over the decades, people wounded and maimed by the fighting, lost generation after lost generation of children whose education and development have been cruelly snatched away. Refugees and internally displaced people forced to flee their homes, schools, hospitals, playgrounds, homes, and entire neighborhoods leveled. When we consider the costs of war to the global economy, but most of all, to humanity's very soul, peace building is a bargain and a prerequisite for development and a better future for all. I look forward to working with this Commission as we make this case to member states next month and strengthen our peace-building architecture for the future with also a stronger peace-building Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for your very strong support and for sharing with us in great detail your report, your proposals, and for your very clear message on the urgency, rationale, and need for the PBC to be on a firm and predictable footing on resources and funding. We all agree that prevention is more cost efficient than responding to conflicts, and we are prepared to be as innovative and forthcoming as possible to reach that goal. Your report, Mr. Secretary General, and the discussion that we'll have today will be an important contribution for the high-level meeting next month. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I'll now open the floor, and I will request delegations wishing to take the floor to indicate their interest in the chat box. And Secretary General has agreed to stay with us for longer than we anticipated him to be here with us. And after that, Assistant Secretary General Elizabeth Spiha will be with us to take our questions and respond. We have interpretation services in all 6 languages until 12 noon. And so I would humbly request all delegations to limit their statements to 2 to 3 minutes so that we can get a maximum number of ambassadors and other representatives to speak before the Secretary General has to leave. I now would like to give the floor to the Vice Chair, Ambassador Osama Abdul Khalik, the PR of Egypt. Osama, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, my dear sister Ambassador Rabab, distinguished Secretary General. Thank you very much for being with us today in this important meeting. Egypt strongly welcomes your report, Mr. Secretary General, and commends the progress made in the implementation of the 2020 twin resolutions. We're confident that the Secretariat will continue its effort to enhance the system-wide, coherent, and impactful delivery on peace building. Equally, Egypt shares your view on the centrality of conflict prevention and peace building to the work of the UN, and as finance is the most critical enabler to effectively sustain peace, Secretary General, we remain deeply concerned over the lack of adequate, predictable, and sustained funding for peace building, which constitutes the most critical challenge facing the peace building architecture. Unfortunately, the rhetoric of member states on the commitment to invest in prevention and peace building does not match their actions. Building and sustaining peace is at the core of the Charter. It is delusional to think that we can realize this objective solely through voluntary contributions and innovative solutions. Therefore, member states have a collective responsibility to fulfill in good faith their obligations under the Charter for funding peace building through assessed contribution. The $100 million is a bare minimum, but it's a good start. Let's do it. The high-level meeting on financing for peace building next month is our golden opportunity to take concrete actions and make significant commitments to ensure peace building saves more lives and resources. I reiterate Egypt's full support to fund peace building through assessed contributions, including through sufficient funding to peace building components of the UN peacekeeping missions and SPMs. Our delegation, as representing Africa in the Bureau, will engage constructively with all the stakeholders in the high-level meeting and the fifth committee. We couldn't find a better investment in the UN. We will work very hard to that effect. We fully support the very inspirational ideas emanating and coming from the Secretary General himself. And with all our collective efforts, we will prevail, we will succeed. I'm optimistic and we should work very hard. Thank you very much.
I thank you. I thank you, Ambassador Osama. And now I give the floor to Vice Chair Ambassador Jose Blanco, PR of Dominican Republic. Jose, you have the floor.
Thank you, dear Ambassador Abab. I will have my remarks in Spanish. They're going to be short. Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta. Es para mí un honor dirigirme a ustedes hoy en mi condición de vicepresidente de esta comisión para la conciliación de la paz. Apreciamos y saludamos la presencia del Secretario General hoy y la presentación de su informe sobre la consolidación de la paz, y tomamos nota del mismo. A pesar de estos avances, sigue habiendo deficiencias considerables en los recursos y las capacidades disponibles para cumplir los objetivos de consolidación de la paz, incluidos en los mandatos de las misiones, y responder así a las necesidades nacionales más amplias en este respecto. La República Dominicana asegura su apoyo irrestricto a todos los esfuerzos para el fortalecimiento de la PBC y toda su estructura, incluyendo un financiamiento adecuado y previsible basado en un análisis multidimensional de cada conflicto. La próxima reunión del 27 de abril brinda una oportunidad única y esperada desde hace muchos años para tomar nota y medidas concretas, hacer compromisos significativos para garantizar que la consolidación de la paz salve más vidas con los recursos necesarios y creando así las condiciones para un desarrollo sostenible y estable en las áreas impactadas. Debemos impulsar un documento final en abril que incluya un proceso orientado a la acción, como ya hemos escuchado, que buscará proporcionar diferentes mecanismos financieros para garantizar un financiamiento adecuado, predecible y sostenido en estos procesos de paz. Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta.
I thank you very much, Ambassador Jose. The next three speakers are the permanent representatives of the United Kingdom, Morocco, and Japan. And I would now like to call upon the permanent representative of the United Kingdom. Barbara, you have the floor.
Rabab, thank you very much for chairing this today. And thank you, Secretary General, for setting out the challenge and the possibility so clearly. As the Secretary General said, the task grows larger with 25% of humanity in conflict. And we see from the report and our own experience how the majority of wars today are driven by a blend of economic, social, environmental, and political factors, intersecting challenges that require integrated solutions that get at the root causes of conflict and violence. That is what peace building is about. And that's why the United Kingdom has been steadfast in its support, political and financial, for United Nations peacebuilding assistance. We have contributed over $230 million to the Peacebuilding Fund since its inception. But looking ahead, next month's high-level summit is an opportunity for the full United Nations membership to grapple with the fact that peacebuilding remains chronically underfunded and to take concrete steps to resolve that. Secretary General, The United Kingdom is grateful for the proposals contained in your report, and we're studying all of these options closely. And as co-chair with Sweden of the group of friends of the Peacebuilding Fund, we are committed to strengthening the fund. We're working to advance prospects for innovative financing and to deepen strategic partnerships with the international financial institutions. We're also acutely aware that the current global economic climate is already straining both stability itself and the resources available to support that stability. And this is a dangerous spiral, and there's no magic solution to it. We need to explore all options, and we need to ensure maximum impact across all resource strands. So in conclusion, I want to assure you that the United Kingdom remains fully committed to conflict prevention and to maximizing the impact of UN peacebuilding activities. Thank you, Rabab.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you very much. And now I call upon the permanent representative of Morocco, Ambassador Hilali. Omar, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, my dear sister. Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, le Royaume du Maroc se félicite de votre dernier rapport Consolidation, pérennisation de la paix et prend bien note des conclusions qu'il contient, car ils ont le mérite d'être clairs en désignant les aspects de la prévention et du financement comme sous-bassement de la consolidation et pérennisation de la paix contemporaine. Bien que ce constat ait été dûment souligné dans vos précédents rapports sur la question, les effets combinés des menaces préexistantes et des nouveaux lots de défis multidimensionnels que vous avez soulignés dans votre intervention de ce matin, mais également qui sont dus à la pandémie, ont indéniablement conféré un sentiment d'urgence au besoin d'effectivement consolider la paix, passer de la réponse à la prévention des conflits, cost efficient, et de faire preuve de créativité en ce qui concerne les voies de financement adaptées aux défis actuels. Votre rapport, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, met toute la lumière sur les lacunes critiques qui s'érigent comme obstacles aux efforts de consolidation de la paix, actuellement déployés au niveau local, régional et international. Ce qui nous pousse à nous poser les bonnes questions à moins d'un mois de la réunion de haut niveau de l'Assemblée générale sur le financement de la consolidation de la paix. Comme vous l'avez mentionné, les besoins en matière de consolidation de la paix, tout comme le fossé relatif au financement, ont augmenté. Le Maroc estime ainsi qu'un état des lieux global et qu'une cartographie des menaces géospécifiques actuelles devront être établies dans le cadre de cette nouvelle ère post-Covid. Et ce, afin de mieux guider les financements et efforts de consolidation de la paix dans les domaines où ils sont les plus nécessaires, dans le plein respect du principe de l'appropriation nationale, mais également là où ils sont les plus urgents. Le Maroc s'aligne sur l'idée que la conclusion de partenariats gagnants et l'utilisation de tous les leviers de coopération est clé pour déverrouiller le plein potentiel de ce qui peut être fait en matière de consolidation de la paix sur le terrain. Pour conclure, le Royaume du Maroc se félicite de votre rapport, Monsieur le Secrétaire général. Agrémente les efforts en cours pour maintenir la collaboration interpilier ainsi que l'agenda 2030 pour le développement durable. Mon pays soutient fermement votre proposition d'élever un nouvel agenda pour la paix, en particulier votre appel à l'allocation de toute urgence au PBF des contributions statutaires. Le Maroc espère que la réunion de haut niveau de l'Assemblée générale sur le financement de la consolidation de la paix créera un tournant, pas tant en termes de changement de narrative, mais de mentalité en matière de consolidation de la paix, mais également d'engagement ferme et concret. Nous espérons particulièrement que cette réunion puisse déboucher sur des résultats concrets y compris un outcome fort pour assurer le financement adéquat, prévisible et durable de la consolidation de la paix. Nous continuerons à faire l'écho de votre appel pour un quantum leap en matière de financement adéquat du PBF auquel le Maroc a fait plusieurs contributions. Le Maroc poursuivra sa coopération solidaire, plurielle et dynamique visant à promouvoir une paix pérenne au niveau régional et international. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, dear Omar. Before moving on to the next speaker, I will humbly request all my dear colleagues to keep their intervention short so that we can have the maximum number of ambassadors speak before the Secretary General has to leave. I would now like to call upon the permanent representative of Japan, Ambassador Ishikane, and he'll be followed by Nigeria, Germany, and Sweden, the permanent representative of Nigeria, Germany, and Sweden.
Well, Madam Chair,
Yes,
thank you
please.
for convening this meeting. I also thank Secretary General for his briefing. Well, I think today's meeting is also timely as the member states are starting to reflect how the new agenda for peace proposed in the OCA report should be framed and agreed at the summit of the future next year. So I would like to share Japan's 3 points priorities regarding the work of the United Nations for peace building and sustaining peace in the context of the OCA follow-up. First, focusing on prevention, conflict prevention, including stopping to relapse into conflict. It requires joint effort of peace building and development actors. The aim is to build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions and capacity building of those who will operate the institutions. And in this context, Japan proposes that education in emergencies and protracted crisis summit in September. Second, importance of partnerships and networking under the development peace humanitarian nexus. Peace building should remain at the heart of the new agenda for peace, and a broad range of stakeholders needs to be mobilized in a joint effort with its unique mandate to connect all relevant actors to marshal resources. The PBC should propose integrated strategies and give advice to relevant UN organs, including Security Council, GA, and ECOSOC. The strengthening role of PBC should be discussed as a part of the new agenda for peace. Third, strengthening finance. Financial needs to build and sustain peace are enormous and require mobilization of entire UN funding mechanisms and beyond. The key is to strengthen the coherence to achieve greater synergy. We should take full advantage of the upcoming high-level meeting to discuss measures to mobilize various financial instruments in and outside the United Nations system and utilize them in efficient and effective manner. To conclude, I would like to assure you of Japan's full commitment to supporting UN's peace-building activities and to contribute to the work of PBC, the primary venue to discuss this agenda. Thank you very much. I don't hear you.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Ambassador Ishikane. I would now like to give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Nigeria, to be followed by Sweden and then Sierra Leone. You have the floor, Brother Tijani.
Madam Chair, Mr. Secretary General, and Excellencies, at the outset, let me thank the Secretary General for today's comprehensive briefing on his report on peace building and sustaining peace. The outlook on the current direction, needs, and challenges for financing peace building contained in this report are reminders that ahead of the high-level meeting on finance, our actions must be consistent with our words. Excellencies, like other speakers, allow me to highlight a few other areas of interest to my delegation. It is commendable that in its advisory role, the letter of the PBC to the General Assembly ahead of the meeting puts forward concrete suggestions for sustainable financing for peace building. Puts forward also assessed contribution at the center of this mechanism. Like the SG notes in his report, agreeing on how assessed contributions can be used to close the funding gap would truly send a powerful signal regarding the universal commitment of member states to peace building and sustaining peace. Excellencies, Nigeria strongly supports the SG's call in the report on our common agenda for the development of a new agenda for peace with more investment in prevention and peace building. Given the protracted nature of many conflicts across the globe today, there is need for the UN system as a whole to recalibrate its efforts to address the challenges and complexities responsible for the current gap in funding peace building. Let me emphasize that effective prevention and peace building also require long-term whole society approaches, which must promote active and meaningful participation of women, youth, and civil society. It is in this context that we express concern that financing for women and youth-focused local peace-building initiatives continue to lag behind, despite the highly vulnerable nature of these demographics during conflict. As such, there is need to work to remove all barriers to accessing funding for these actors at the grassroots level, as well as encourage more donors into the space. Ultimately, ensuring predictability and sustainability of programmatic funding for peace building, especially for PVF, is an imperative outcome from the upcoming GA high-level meeting on financing. As such, in addition to exploring the merits of such contribution to the PBF, we believe that diversifying the donor base and exploring innovative financing instruments for mobilizing private and other public funds are increasingly important. In addition, while there has been significant support from the international financial institutions towards peace building funding, especially in fragile and conflict settings, there is still need for increased partnership and synergy with these actors to sustain delivery of basic services while preparing for recovery. Excellencies, Nigeria is fully on board on all efforts of our organization to make peace at the center of our work, including through peace building and sustaining peace. The comprehensive report of the SG advances this undertaking, and indeed, further support through assessed contributions is additional assurance of sustainability and predictability, and I think we should all support this. I thank you.
I thank you, dear Ambassador. And now I would like to give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Sweden. Anna-Karin, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair Rabab, and my appreciation to the Secretary General for being with us, but more importantly for your key report that you have presented to us today. We fully concur with you that the current financing for prevention and peace building remains inadequate, not least as we know, and as you said, Secretary General, that our task becomes larger and larger. And we know that investing in prevention works. We know that it saves lives and it is effective. From our perspective, we therefore express our strong support for your call to scale up bilateral and multi-stakeholder investment in peace building in line with your common agenda and the new agenda for peace. Rabab, let me make two points. First, agreeing with the Secretary General and others that the upcoming General Assembly high-level meeting on peace building financing provides an important opportunity to make significant and concrete commitments to advance options for peace building. We must be ambitious in this endeavor, and we affirm our commitment to pursue an action-oriented outcome which takes into consideration all options for ensuring adequate, predictable, and sustained peace building financing. With the meeting only 4 weeks ahead, we want to very strongly emphasize the importance that we start preparations for this meeting now. We need to do that if we will have to have a concrete outcome from the meeting. And Secretary General, thank you very much for setting out your view on what you see as an outcome, a good outcome of this meeting. And I can just pledge our full support to work for that we utilize this meeting as well as we can. Secondly, the high-level meeting will also be a moment to take stock and set out path forward and recommend to collaborative and concerted efforts towards good peace-building financing. After over a year-long efforts led by Sweden at political level, with partners, a group of key donors have jointly arrived at a set of action-oriented recommendations for good peace-building financing, and that financing actors can get behind. With a joint letter, we will present a number of commitments from our side as donors on steps we will take to advance good peace building financing, as well as ask to the UN system and other key actors. We're looking forward to presenting this letter ahead of the high-level meeting in April. And with that, I just want to pledge our continued support to you, Secretary General, to the PBSO for all efforts in this regard, including the 3 asks that you presented to us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna-Karine. And also I commend you for the excellent work that you're doing as a co-chair of the Peace Building Fund, group of friends of the Peace Building Fund. Thank you very much. I would now like to call upon the permanent representative of Sierra Leone, and he'll be followed by the permanent representatives of the Netherlands, South Africa, and Brazil. You have the floor, my brother Al-Haji.
Thank you very much, my dear sister and then chair, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, good morning. Sierra Leone is a proof of the benefits brought by the advocacy and convening power of the PBC and funding from the Peace Building Fund. We are therefore particularly pleased with the recommendations made by the UN Secretary General in his 2022 report, especially in support of countries in conflict or that are in transition. We are also pleased to note and acknowledge the work of the PBC and the PBF on gender equalities, which also require adequate financing. We are in full support of the Secretary General's high-level meeting of the General Assembly to be convened during the 76th session, focused on financing for peace building, and we hope that it will result in concrete outcome and will inspire decisive action, including through additional voluntary and access contributions to the PBF. We also value the options that the Secretary General has put on the table, including innovative financing and stronger partnerships with IFIs. They should all be seriously considered. We further thank the SG for his 2021 report, Our Common Agenda, for proposing development of a new agenda for peace. We hope that this new agenda for peace could leverage more investment in prevention and peace building, as well as provide support for countries under the consideration of the PBC, including delivery continued finance assistance for countries like Sierra Leone that have exited from the formal agenda of the PBC towards building resilience, sustainable peace, and development. Let me conclude by stating that we fully agree that the effective collaboration and resources should be leveraged to help countries transition out of conflict, address inequalities, and build resilience by transforming political, social, and economic systems to include women and youth. As cited in paragraph 16 of SG's report, we commend the UNDP for supporting increased participation of women in political processes in Sierra Leone. To that end, we look forward to adequate support as we prepare for national elections in 2023 to further advance the process of democratic consolidation in Sierra Leone. We also look forward to continuing engagement with the PBC with a focus on Sierra Leone's effort to engage youth in all sectors of the society and promote women's empowerment to build back better from the COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you, my sister.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my dear brother. I now call upon the distinguished permanent representative of the Netherlands, dear Joka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, dear Rabab, and also thanks to the Secretary General for the presentation of his report today, and importantly for his leadership on this important topic. I think I can be brief, Madam Chair, because we don't need to talk about the why anymore. I think the why is clear, and it has been clear for a while. Peace building works, and it is a proven investment, a bargain, as the Secretary General just said. After all, we know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So that's why the Netherlands is a strong supporter of prevention and peace building, and also among the top donors of the PBF. So we now need, with the needs increasing, to focus on how to find a structural answer to a structural problem. Like others, we see the upcoming high-level meeting as an opportunity, a golden opportunity, as Osama just said, to find that structural answer. And we are calling for a real, concrete and actionable outcome for the meeting, as others have also done. For the Netherlands, it's clear that assessed contributions are a necessary part of the answer, and we therefore wholeheartedly support the SG's proposal to commit $100 million to assessed contributions for peace building. The proposal for assessed contributions, in our view, is strategic, relevant, and importantly doable, and immediately doable. As stated in the SG's report, we as member states, and particularly us here in the Peace Building Commission, need to send an important message about our support for the essential role of the UN in prevention and peace building, the essential role in reducing the potential of both the outbreak of and relapse into conflict, thereby saving lives and avoiding the need for far costlier crisis response interventions in future. The millions of people affected by conflict, and as always, they are the poorest and the most vulnerable that pay the highest price, deserve our strong support, commitment, and action. And therefore, at the high-level meeting, we need not just to show our support and commitment, but also our action towards sustainable and predictable funding with assessed contributions at its core. And my question would be what more we can do to guarantee such a strong outcome, and how to make assessed funding a reality. And reiterating the call also that Anna-Karin just made about the urgent need to start the preparations for the meeting soon if we are to get that concrete, actionable outcome. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Yoka. I now would like to give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of South Africa. Mathu, you have the floor, sister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Rabab. Secretary General, we thank you for your presence here today and for the briefing on the report. It is comprehensive and very strong on peace building. And this commission really appreciate your strong support for the commission and the message that you sent out there. That consistent message of prevention and peace building as being important. And we couldn't agree more with you that compared to the cost of war, peace building is a bargain. We agree with the Secretary General and his report that current financing for peace building and prevention is inadequate. And while the 2030 Agenda for Development, as well as regional development objectives, such as our own Agenda 2063 for Africa, are important to achieve, we really must ensure that our actions are concrete enough and that they begin to address and prevent future global challenges. Addressing the root cause of conflict includes structural and institutional barriers and conflict drivers such as multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, the denial of human rights, the lack of access to and equitable distribution of natural resources, social services, and economic opportunities, which are all critical for social cohesion and prevention of conflict. The exclusion of women and youth can also be addressed through the implementation of the Women and Youth Peace and Security agendas and their respective complementary national and regional implementation frameworks that we have in place. SG, we take on board the 3 areas that you have specified here this morning where you have asked for our support. We are all alive also to ensuring that the high-level meeting is productive and that we propose concrete solution so that the outcome is a good one and a concrete one. South Africa supports your call for funding from assessed contributions, and we commit to working with others to explore other innovative ways of and sources of funding. Specifically, South Africa has been involved in exploring the whole area of private sector and its contribution to peace, and we will continue working with others within the PBC to ensure that we find a meaningful way that the private sector can contribute. Secretary General, once again, thank you for your report, and you can be assured of South Africa's support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my dear sister. I would now like to call upon the distinguished permanent representative of Brazil, Ronaldo. You have the floor. And Secretary General, after Brazil, we have a couple of more PRs who would like to take the floor before we move on to the DPRs. So I would like to give you the floor after them. Is that all right? Will you be able to stay?
I'm fine until 11:30.
Fantastic.
So
we'll
I think there will be time for
take
all
on
interventions.
More. Fantastic. Okay, sir. I will then move on with the list of speakers. Ronaldo, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, distinguished Chairwoman. And let me thank the Secretary General for coming here today and sharing his views and his ideas on the future of peace building. Let me say that we are really heartened by the commitment and dedication he has always shown to the concept of peace building, and we see that once again today. In your presentation, let me say that we are extremely comforted by the emphasis you have put on the area of prevention. We do recall that this was one of the concepts at the heart of the discussions that led to the creation of the PBC, and unfortunately, it's something that's fallen by the wayside along the years. So we're very gratified that you are pulling it back and putting it front center stage at this moment. On the issue of financing, we also take note of your very sobering comments on the need to improve the financing basis of PBF. And we will be dedicating enormous importance to discussing this at the high-level meeting towards the end of April. Let me just say, we also attach enormous importance in the work on peace building to promote greater synergy and partnerships with international financial institutions, regional organizations, and all the UN agencies. We think that we have to work comprehensively together with all these bodies to make the work count. Besides financing, I would also like to emphasize on the side of human resources. And in this capacity building for us is a key element in the work of peace building. In that context, we would like to stress the importance and the opportunities provided by South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to help in peace building activities. Let me just thank everyone, Secretary General, for one very positive development, which is the sharing of Security Council reports with the PBC. I think this is something we have always advocated for. We think it helps the synergy between the Council and the Commission, and we strongly urge that this practice continue to strengthen relations between those two bodies. Just to conclude, let me ask the Secretary General one quick question, and going back to the role of prevention. I would appreciate his views on how we can ensure that the ongoing work by the UN in member states in economic and social dimensions, which also has, at the end of the day, has a peace building function, how we can avoid any kind of overlapping or conflict between these two activities from the PBC and from the regular development and social work of the UN in the field. Thank you.
I thank you, dear Ronaldo. And now I would like to give the floor to the next three PRs, to start with the Permanent Representative of Canada, followed by New Zealand, and then the European Union. Bob, you have the floor. Can you unmute yourself, Bob?
I was giving a great speech. I'll have to start again. I just wanted to thank you, Rabab, and thank all my friends on the screen. I particularly want to welcome Liz Pahar, who's the new ASG. We're very delighted to have her with us and so proud to have her leadership. And Secretary General, thank you so much for not only for being with us, but for staying for such a long time and for really sharing with us your concerns and preoccupations. The tone of my remarks is going to be very positive. I want to just stress a couple of things. First of all, there is, I think, a very deep-seated agreement on a number of issues that we've been talking about for some considerable time. And I think our key challenge now is actually executing on them all as best we can. The first one is to ensure that there is going to continue to be stable funding and to build as much as possible to build assessed contributions into that. We all know the hurdles. We know how challenging it is. We know there are countries that are not in favor of it. And we know there are different points of view. But whatever, we'll get there somehow. There are always going to be more good ideas than there is money. So we have to accept the fact that we're not going to get everything we want, but we are going to have to get more than we have. That's, I think, the key point. The second key point is I've noticed since I chaired the commission in my early days here as PR, the IFIs are really getting into the game, and they're getting into the game in a more substantial way than ever before, looking at fragile states, looking at how they can deal with conflict more effectively, understanding the role that they play in the field of development and in the field of actually making contributions. We've had regular participation from both the World Bank and the IMF in our discussions. They've been regular briefers of ours. And now we have to take the next step and hold their hands and say, let's formalize some of these partnerships in a way that will take us further than we are now. And let's light a candle here, because we've got a chance to do that. The next is the private sector. And again, I think it's fascinating to me that we have Matu from South Africa and so many other speakers, Ronaldo and others have spoken about the need for us to Barbara talking about it from a UK point of view. It's really critical that we, again, think in practical terms how we explore this and understand that there's no magic pot at the end of the rainbow, but there is a need to understand the connection between peace and development and peace. There is a nexus. The nexus is actually mentioned in the charter. I keep telling people the nexus is not a new idea. It's at the foundation of the charter. So the last point is, again, has been made. Ronaldo made it just most recently, and I agree with him completely. We have to put the UN system to work even more effectively so that we're working really well together. Again, UNDP plays a key role, but there are a number of other agencies that also play a key role. And I think if we do these four things and make them the sort of the highlight of the practical work that we need to do at the high level meeting, try and get the senior people from the IFIs at the high level meeting, try to get more engagement from the countries that frankly talk a good game but don't necessarily contribute as much as they should, and make some progress on the issue of assessed contributions. I think we can keep working at that. Then I think we will have a successful meeting. But let's not build ourselves up for failure. Let's build ourselves up for what will be success. And I think success is going to be making progress in all these areas. Understanding that, as the Secretary General said at the beginning, and I agree with him completely, the question of the prevention of conflict and the management of conflict and eventually the resolution of conflict are at the heart of the life of this institution. It's why we were born. It's why we were created. So we have to make sure that we're always building on that, on the great work we've done before, but we're improving on it. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, dear Bob. I would now like to call upon the distinguished permanent representative of New Zealand, Caroline. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Rabab, for convening us all here this morning, and good morning to all our colleagues. Thank you very much, Secretary General, for your briefing and your report, and as others have said, for staying on here with us this morning. We agree with you that peace is the most important task that we have here at the UN. And as you say, and others have concurred this morning, peace building is certainly a proven investment. I'd like to make three quick key points this morning. The first one is on financing. As a consistent funder and contributor of the fund, New Zealand has been pleased to see the steady growth in the Peace Building Fund. However, we agree with others that we do have critical funding shortages facing us, and our diagnosis is that that is primarily a result of the voluntary nature of contributions. So New Zealand welcomes the in-depth discussions that we are planning to have on the UN Peace Building Fund at the April high-level GA meeting. And we are very open to considering proposals to ensure adequate, predictable and sustainable financing options. We believe this includes the possibility of assessed contributions, but of course, as Ronaldo and Matu and Bob have all mentioned already this morning, we think there are a number of options that we should be pursuing to think about how we can address this. My second point relates to local approaches. We very much appreciate the UN's commitment to local approaches. We all know that what works in terms of peace building in one location does not necessarily work or translate into other locations. To this end, we would welcome a stronger focus in the SG's report on Pacific perspectives, particularly as they relate to climate-related security risks. We all know that there is an ever-present risk and a reality and that this is a reality for millions of people around the world. And my third and final point is on our common agenda. We too are very positive about the SG's new agenda for peace. And as noted by our colleague from Sierra Leone this morning, we too also see that the new agenda for peace offers us a pathway and a potential mechanism to further leverage and lift the effectiveness of our prevention and our peace building efforts. And we very much support the SG's continued leadership to this end. Thank you very much, Rabab.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Caroline. I would now like to call upon the permanent delegate of the European Union. Dear Olaf, you have the floor, and Olaf will be followed by the permanent representatives of Bulgaria and Germany. Olaf, you have the floor.
I appreciate it very much, Rabab. Thank you so much. And thank you, Secretary General, for your presentation this morning. And I can testify, having been here several years, how you have been from day one a huge supporter for strengthening the, shall we say, the peace dimension of everything we do. So I mean, what you said today, which is very compelling, is, I know, a continuation of your thoughts for many years. So it's high time that we move forward in everything that you have put forward today. I think one of the things you've said, and that brings me to really express my appreciation also to Elizabeth and to her team and the whole team behind the Peace Building Fund. You've listed several examples of interventions that have been critical in many countries. And I think the point you also make, Secretary General, is that these investments are fairly modest compared to the tremendous cost if we fail in building that peace, in humanitarian suffering, in human lives lost, in peacekeeping investments, and the whole humanitarian financing that needs to come if we fail. So it's just, you know, I think extremely important that we're able to move forward now with some concrete and actionable measures to make sure that funding becomes stronger and more predictable. And I've also taken good note of the three asks that you've put to all of us. And I think I can speak safely on behalf of the EU and its 27 member states that we feel proud that we are moving along all those three dimensions, including being for many years major contributors of the voluntary contributions to the Peace Building Fund, and that will not be diminished moving forward. Now, on the funding models, I was heartened to listen to so many interventions today that find that we are, like we believe, in a much better position than we've been for many years. It's taken a long time, but I think thanks to your report, Secretary General, we now have more concrete ideas on the table. And I want to assure everyone in this call that we, the EU, are ready to constructively look also on assessed contributions. But we all know that there are outstanding questions on, striking the balance between flexibility of the fund, which is part of its success story, and a member state oversight that needs to be part of any assessed contribution scheme, establishing fair assessments rates, designing governance system that everyone is comfortable with, etc., etc. And of course, this is likely, if we are realistic, that it's going to take time. And we don't have that much time if we are looking at this being the main outcome of the high-level meeting. But I agree with many of speakers who've said that we're in a position to deliver on many areas. Assessed contribution, possibly one of them, but also the other areas that have been listed. In Canada was the last one to make it, and New Zealand, Matu from South Africa, and many others. So let's not define success of the meeting a month from now, whether we will have the perfect scheme for assessed contributions or not, but on the broader issues of moving concretely and actionably forward on all these areas to make sure that we do a better job more generally. But I need to say too that we're a little bit concerned, and I think Sweden and Netherlands have also mentioned this, that it's late. It's a month to go for the high-level meeting, and as far as I'm informed, there's still no concept note. Invitations have not really gone out. And if we really want to make a quantum leap forward here, we need to start working hard to make sure that there is a success from this meeting. So I just want to put that out there as well, that we need a little bit more information and meat on the bone if we're able to for us to be able to deliver. Thank you very much again, Rabab, and thank you, Secretary General.
Sorry, unmuting. I would now like to give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Bulgaria, followed by Germany, and then the permanent observer for the African Union.
Thank you very much, Rabab, and I'll be brief because a lot of the comments that I wanted to make were already made before me. I wanted to start with thanking the Secretary General for being here with us today, but also for the report. It is an extremely important contribution and we highly value it. Of course, Bulgaria fully supports the emphasis you put on prevention, and we cannot emphasize enough how important it is to invest in prevention. No cost is too high for actually investing in prevention. So we urge that we focus on that. And you made it very clear what the alternative would be if prevention doesn't work. And peace building has proven that it works. So I don't think that it is necessary to argue in that direction. In regards to financing for peace building, we also think that we have to ensure sustained, predictable, and sufficient funding. And that's why we look at the high-level meeting that is 4 weeks from now as an extremely valuable opportunity that we should not miss. I also am a bit worried that the preparations seem to be a little bit behind. So I urge that we focus on that, and that you mentioned also, you made a call for concrete actions. Even if we don't get all the decisions we want to get from that meeting, it is a good start. And if we have at least a few things that we can agree on to work forward and to have a roadmap on how we can ensure funding, that also would be a good achievement in that direction. And of course, we cannot expect an answer in less than 4 weeks on assessed contributions, but it is important to continue the conversation and see how we move forward on that one. So you have our full support as Bulgaria and as a member of the Peace Building Commission, and thank you very much again for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Latizara. I would now like to give the floor to the permanent representative of Germany. Ante, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear Rabab, and thank you also. I join others in thanking the Secretary General for his long-term commitment to the Peacebuilding Commission, to peacebuilding as such, and also for his today's briefing. We are in the midst of an ongoing aggression of a war in Europe. And it is important for me to start with the message that it is really our common duty not to be upheld, and continue to support the work we have in the Peace Building Commission together, because it's about the principles, the most important principles of the UN Charter. And I think it's our common duty to work towards supporting and promoting sustained and lasting peace worldwide, all the more against the backdrop of this situation. And my message is also Germany is continuing to be a firm supporter of the new agenda for peace, Mr. Secretary General, and we will also continue to support the peace building work and the focus on protected crises in Africa, Latin America and Asia. All the more that we have the attention on Ukraine, we know how important it is. I think it's even more important now. I don't need to say so much on prevention. This is a long-standing issue we are supporting, of course. It's cost-effective, it's a bargain, maybe it's an extremely grand bargain. And it's also a central, or prevention is also a central tenet of our common agenda. And I think what others have said, and this is of course the theme and issue for the high-level meeting at the end of April, there is no doubt that peace-building efforts, both inside and out the UN system, are currently underfunded. So the main thing today, I think, is also to leave the message here of Germany that we support your recommendation to increase joint efforts to close this gap. We think that business as usual won't do. You know, of course, that Germany and 2 other countries make up for 55% of the voluntary contributions to the PBF. We're proud of that, but it's also not really sustainable. So we urge, of course, more commitment from other member states on the voluntary contributions, but we also know that this will not do the trick alone. And we should continue to broaden our focus and look beyond traditional approaches and sources to fund the UN's peace-building work, especially to really achieve our common objectives stated in the new Agenda for Peace. Assessed contributions will have to be a part of the equation. And the UNGA high-level meeting so now we'll discuss, and I'm really echoing others in saying we should aim for a broadly agreed outcome document, even if it's only the first step to the assessed contributions, because we have somehow to come out of this vicious circle, and we also have to muster the support of, I think, the overwhelming majority of the member states that want to join in supporting the Peace-Building Commission, in supporting the Peace-Building Fund, in supporting the issue of prevention, and of course the new Agenda for Peace. So find a way how other member states can do this outside the Peace-Building Commission without, of course, in the limits of their possibilities, and to create an option for that and a way forward is very important. So I don't think I know there is not much time left, but I think this political goal is still at our hands and can be achieved also in this short time. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will be there, and we will be there. Germany will try to be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Ante, for your statement. And I would now like to give the floor to the permanent observer for the African Union. Dear Sister Fatima, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, my sister Ambassador Rabab, for the opportunity. And good morning, SG, Excellencies. I'd like to join others in thanking the SG for his report and to support most of what has already been said. the tangible benefits of the peace building fund support in strengthening rule of law, security, and governance institutions have been critical to peace building in African countries on the agenda of the PBC and others that have also benefited from it. And given the catalytic role of the PBC, which is limited to transitional phases, there's an urgent need for increased and sustainable funding for medium to long-term development. And long-term sustainable funding is needed to complete the projects and programs funded by the Peace Building Fund, so as to ensure that such programs and projects do not fall into despair. That said, the AU would therefore like to echo the SG's messages, including in his report on our common agenda and the proposed support for stronger commitment and investment in prevention and peace building, including through additional dedicated resources to the Peace Building Fund. There is a strong imperative to consider allocating a certain percentage of assessed contributions to support medium to long-term peace building in order to ensure continuity, predictability, sustainability, and of course, financing for peace building. And from the AU side, the AU would leverage its newly reinvigorated Peace Fund to support peace building initiatives. The Peace Fund would serve as a catalytic instrument that will ensure timely and predictable support by the AU within its capacity. And we also recognize that the Peace Fund is not designated to support large-scale and long-term peace-building programs. It is therefore important to ensure there is complementarity between the Peace Fund and other mechanisms, particularly references that I can make, such as the UNDP-led Regional Stabilization Facility for the Lake Chad Basin, as well as other financing facilities. I'd like to just underline that optimizing this complementarity between existing financing instruments would scale up our collective efforts to address the financing gap for peace building. And of course, establishing effective partnerships would be an important step towards this collective effort to address the financing gap for peace building. So from our side, we are looking forward to this high-level meeting, and we sincerely hope that we will get the requisite support from all member states and other partners in this regard. I thank you.
I thank you, my dear sister Fatima. Mr. Secretary General, thank you very much for staying on beyond the expected time. So we have about 15 minutes left for you to respond. There are still some speakers left, but I think we'll have to continue after you leave. Assistant Secretary General Elizabeth Spiha will be here.
I can prolong 15 minutes more. I have just canceled one thing that I could cancel.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I think that speaks volume of your support for the Commission and to the issue that we are discussing. Thank you very much. I think that's greatly appreciated. Let me then continue with the list of speakers, and I would like to now call upon the Chargé d'Affaires of Latvia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear Secretary General, Excellencies. Latvia highly appreciates this meeting with the Secretary General, which provides an opportunity to discuss our common peace building priorities. Your annual report on peace building and sustaining peace, as well as the briefing today, provides an accurate and in-depth assessment of the current situation. There have been remarkable achievements in the area of peace building, while serious challenges remain. Latvia underlines the importance of strengthening resilience of institutions in post-conflict situations, including by promoting good governance, media literacy, digital skills, and inclusive participation of youth and women, in line with the WPS agenda. We believe these are the key elements to achieve sustainable results. Unfortunately, as you have highlighted in your remarks, dear Secretary General, we have witnessed emergence of a large-scale unprovoked aggression in Europe, which has disrupted the international peace and security, as well as peace-building efforts. A member of the Peace-Building Commission, Russia, has invaded Ukraine, leading to immense suffering of the Ukrainian people and causing the largest humanitarian crisis in Europe since the World War II. The impact of Russia's war is reaching far beyond Ukraine, as it is also leading to global food insecurity and increased prices of fuel, adding to the negative effects of other crises, including the COVID-19. These developments should be taken into account in the context of UN peacebuilding efforts. However, the only sustainable solution is to stop the Russian aggression. As it has been rightly pointed out, achieving sustainable financing for peacebuilding is of key importance in order to address the increasing demand in this field. For this reason, Latvia has become a donor of Peacebuilding Fund and supports the calls, including within our common agenda, for adequate, predictable, and sustained financing for peace building. All options should be on the table, including the assessed contributions. So we are looking forward to the high-level meeting on financing on peace building at the end of April to advance this priority towards a concrete result. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Latvia, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kenya. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to thank Secretary General for the overview and particularly focusing this interim report on financing for peace building. The Peace Building and Sustaining Peace report, read alongside our common agenda and the AU Common African Position on Peace Building, all underscore two imperatives. First is that peace building is a critical conflict preventive tool. And secondly, that there is therefore need and urgency for adequate, predictable, and sustained resources for the UN peacebuilding architecture. As Kenya has stated before, the current modest resources compared to the demand necessitates a consideration of all options for ensuring this predictability and sustainability. And this imperative, Chair, has also been emphasized by the AU, including this morning by our own Ambassador Fatima, AU Permanent Observer, in the context of optimizing complementarity between existing financing instruments for the medium and long term. The current SG's report makes a persuasive case, in our view, as to why funding across the peace continuum is critical. Kenya particularly welcomes the country and region-specific examples and the mapping and an analysis of financial flows in conflict-affected settings. The report aptly outlines why strengthening country capacities for conflict prevention and effective transition from conflict will require consideration, operationalization, and optimization of an array of financing mechanisms and resources, including domestic revenue, voluntary and assessed contributions, as well as innovative partnerships, including with the private sector. The majority of members of the PBC, including Kenya, have rallied behind and continue to support this call, especially in support of countries that are in transition and in conflict settings. We hope the few that remain hesitant to include assessed contribution as part of the peace building model will constructively reconsider in view of the need to ensure predictability and sustainability. Clearly, the issue is no longer why, but how these resources can be unlocked to move the UN system from reacting to conflicts to proactive action. So to conclude, perhaps, Secretary General, as we prepare for the high-level meeting with our fifth committee experts, it would be important to better understand if and when a shift to assessed funding happens, whether the current oversight mechanism is sufficient or will it need to be revisited to ensure accountability to member states. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kenya, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Portugal with, again, a humble request to the remaining speakers to be brief so that, we can allow Secretary General to respond to the many comments that have come from the floor. Thank you very much. Distinguished representative of Portugal, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for your briefing and also for bearing with us. I will try to be very brief.
Portugal welcomes the Secretary General's report, as well as the new agenda for peace set out in the Our Common Agenda report. The numbers of people living in conflict-affected countries, displaced or in need of humanitarian assistance have dramatically risen since the two reports were produced. But the needs they outline are far from outdated. More than ever, it is time to invest in conflict prevention. We should ensure adequate, predictable, and sustained financing for the Peacebuilding Fund, either through assessed contributions, partnerships, or new funding resources. Engaging in different stakeholders in peacebuilding, including the private sector, may contribute not only to be a more peaceful environment, but also to an effective, inclusive, and networked multilateralism. We commend the Secretary General's proposal to put women and girls at the center of peace and security. A useful example of how to bring this about is the initiative mentioned in the report on peacebuilding and sustaining peace, which describes how UNISFA identify gender-specific triggers that lead to tensions and conflict in ABA. This is an exercise that could be replicated in a more systematic and regular manner. Portugal is committed to fulfilling its part in the common endeavor for peace, stability, and shared prosperity. You can count, Mr. Secretary General, on our full support, and I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Portugal, and now I give the floor to the representative of Mexico. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rabab. Very happy to see you. And I would like to be very brief. First of all, on the emphasis that the Secretary General has made on prevention. It is very clear the scenario that you have presented, and you can count with Mexico. We are a firm believer on the issue of prevention and building up on that. For Mexico, and to be very brief, ensuring adequate, predictable, and sustained financing is absolutely essential. We believe that given the economic pressure resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, it even becomes more important to be creative and to explore other forms of financing. We have already heard here about contributions in kind and different forms of cooperation. Secondly, the participation of the private sector. The report also highlights on innovative alternatives. We believe in this as well. We agree on the relevance of expanding this conversation and considering all options available. Thirdly, for us, for Mexico, having predictable resources will benefit actions to ensure progress on the women, peace and security agenda. So we reiterate the importance of promoting dedicated funding for organizations led by women peace builders. And finally, I would like to express our appreciation for the work and flexibility of the Peacebuilding Fund and its achievements, which have been met thanks to the fund's dedication and commitment. So thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary General, and we're here to back you up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would now like to give the floor to the distinguished DPR of Switzerland. You have the floor, sir.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, je reste court. Je me focus sur l'essentiel. Merci beaucoup d'avoir convoqué cette réunion et d'avoir organisé cet exposé détaillé et très utile. On se trouve en effet moins d'un mois avant la réunion de haut niveau sur le financement de la consolidation de la paix. Je pense que nous sommes vraiment à un point critique dans notre effort commun pour fournir un financement plus adéquat, prévisible et soutenu pour la consolidation de la paix. Et qu'il s'agisse d'une utilisation plus large ou plus efficace des sources de financement traditionnelles ou encore d'un financement innovant, toutes les pistes seront nécessaires pour faire face à l'augmentation du nombre des mandats, comme l'ont expliqué plusieurs collègues avant moi déjà. La Suisse, Monsieur le Président, Madame la Présidente, sur l'ensemble des recommandations et soutient ceux qui sont contenus dans le rapport du secrétaire général. Et on aimerait bien souligner notre conviction que les tâches mandatées, y compris la consolidation de la paix, devraient autant que possible être financées par des contributions obligatoires. Et Madame la Présidente, compte tenu du moment critique que représentent les transitions entre les opérations de maintien de la paix et les missions politiques spéciales, permettez-moi de demander au secrétaire général si des expériences ont déjà été recueillies dans le cadre du projet des Nations Unies sur les transitions qui est mentionné dans le rapport et s'il attend à ce qu'une meilleure coordination et intégration entre DCO, DPO, le DPPA et PNUD puissent générer des synergies qui permettront une utilisation plus efficace des fonds restreints. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Thank you very much, distinguished representative of Switzerland. And now I give the floor to the last three speakers, Mrs. Secretary General. They're very important speakers, and then I turn back the floor to you to respond. So I'd like to first call upon the DPR of India, followed by China and the Republic of Korea. You have the floor, India.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. I'll be brief. I join others in thanking Secretary General for his...
Your voice is coming very low. Can you come closer to the microphone, please?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I join others in thanking Secretary General for his comprehensive briefing on the report and his ideas on augmenting financial resources for peace-building activities. At the upcoming high-level meeting on financing, a predictable and effective solution needs to be found. We are passing through most challenging and difficult times. As mentioned in the report, COVID-19 pandemic and ongoing conflicts are having devastating impact across the world. As a result, member states, particularly the developing countries, are coming under severe financial stress in their efforts to address developmental challenges. We do welcome, of course, the ideas made by Secretary General in his report. Some of the ideas are indeed path-breaking, particularly mobilizing finances through public-private partnership, social impact or peace bonds, and blended finance. These need careful study. Madam Chair, India has regularly contributed to Peace Building Fund in a modest way. India has also been extensively engaging countries bilaterally, especially in Africa, on projects related to peace building. Total value, that is cumulative value of India's developmental projects with the Global South is more than $40 billion. These include soft loans and grants for projects and capacity building training programs. Most of these projects were either undertaken or committed in the last decade or so. We believe such bilateral partnerships that member states have with countries in PBC configuration needs to be factored in while discussing the financing for peace building. Peace building is also about capacity building. We need to look at building local capacity more seriously, particularly in assisting the host states in the management and maintenance of completed developmental projects. We look forward to the upcoming high-level meeting, and I would like to assure our delegation's commitment to engage in the consultations in a constructive manner. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ravinder, for your statement. I would now like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of China, to be followed by the last speaker, Republic of Korea. You have the floor, China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 主席女士，中方感谢秘书长通报，赞赏秘书长及其团队近年来为建设和平与持续和平所做的努力。预防和解决冲突是联合国工作的核心之一。冲突的结束并不意味着和平的降临，冲突后建设和平对受冲突影响国家实现长治久安具有非常重要的意义。当事国主导权是建设和平工作的基础，也是建和工作取得成效的保障。国际社会应切实尊重当事国主权和主导地位，应当事国要求介入，根据当事国确定的优先领域制定的路线图提供帮助。要注重同当事国加强沟通，根据当事国意见及时调整工作。冲突后国家国情千差万别，建和工作应根据具体情况和当事国需求，形成一国一策的建设和平战略。社会和解及经济社会发展是确保持久和平的关键，应成为建和工作的重点。其他方面工作应视当事国需要开展，不必面面俱到，以免因小失大。关于建和融资，建和委成员已经对此进行了多次讨论。中方认为应尽量凝聚共识，最大限度地发挥建和基金的优势，应优先改进建和基金的工作，加强对项目效果的评估，将有限的资金用在当事国最需要的建和领域，重点加强当事国能力建设。通过前期讨论可以看出，直接通过联合国经常预算和维和摊款向建和基金融资存在很多问题，还需要进一步探讨。中方支持通过加强伙伴关系，扩展建和融资渠道。考虑到建和基金的灵活性，多方位的伙伴关系 可以为建和基金注入新的活力。建和基金可通过与国际和地区金融机构、私营部门合作开展项目，减轻自身资金压力，实现1+1大于2的效果。建和融资需要秉持共同但有区别的责任。国际社会是一个命运共同体，各国彼此密切联系，但各国面临的情况不同。发展中国家自身有较大的发展压力，发达国家应承担更多的责任，为建和融资做出更大的贡献。谢谢主席女士。
I thank the distinguished representative of China, and now I call upon the last speaker for this morning, the Republic of Korea. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to thank the Secretary General for the comprehensive briefing. Investment in prevention and peace building is cost-effective, and RK fully supports Secretary General's overall focus on prevention in our common agenda report, and in particular joins in the support for the new agenda for peace, which underlines investment in prevention and peace building as one of its key components. RK has been vocal advocate for the UN system-wide coherence and HDP nexus, and we believe increasing investment in prevention and peace building can strengthen this cross-pillar approach. RK shares the concern that there has been no substantial progress in making the quantum leap in financing, while the demand for the support from the PBF is quickly outpacing its limited resources. RK is hoping that the upcoming GA high-level meeting for the peace-building financing will serve as a platform to come up with action-oriented outcome. And to this end, RK believes we need to explore and consider all options for ensuring adequate, predictable, and sustaining financing, including the proposals by the Secretary General. In this regard, RK would like to thank the Secretary General for the submission of his report on this matter of financing, which RK is closely looking into. And I hope we can advance our discussion on Secretary General's proposal to assess the contribution for the PBF on the occasion of the upcoming high-level meeting. Lastly, RK would like to underline that there is still a need to continue exploring innovative financing options, including through partnership with the IFIs and regional and sub-regional organizations, as well as public and private partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea. Mr. Secretary General, thank you so much for your patience and for staying on beyond the expected time. Let me now turn back the floor to you to respond to the many comments and reflections from the floor. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely pleased in participating in this meeting until the end, because this is indeed for me a real core priority. And indeed, we are talking of something that is in the core of the UN, peace. I mean, prevention, sustaining peace, peace building are the core of the core, because it is what allows for peace to be preserved and not for us to be condemned to spend most of our time and our resources in managing conflicts and trying to solve them. So this is the very core of the activities of the UN. And that is the reason why there is a peace-building commission. I mean, we have not a food commission of member states. We have not an energy commission of member states. We have not commissions for many other activities of the UN. But we have a peace-building commission of member states. Why? Because the General Assembly and the Security Council understood that this is essential. This is the core of the activities of the UN.
Yeah, okay.
Now, that is why I've been very strongly in favor, not naturally this is a decision for member states to take, the strengthening of the Peace-Building Commission, its enlargement of activity in relation to geography and in relation to the thematics involved, and very much in favor of a stronger institutional link between the Peace-Building Commission, the General Assembly, and the Security Council in the work of the organization. And that is the reason why I'm also strongly committed to make the Peace-Building Fund a much more powerful instrument than what it is today. The Peace-Building Fund is an instrument that I have never seen any country complaining about. On the contrary, I see more and more countries wanting the peace building fund to be involved in their situation. And in all countries where the peace building fund operates, there is a recognition of the ownership of the country and the effectiveness of the fund. On the other hand, the fund works as a multiplicator of other resources. A lot has been said about the cooperation with international financial institutions. That's exactly what is happening in many countries. The fund becomes a catalyst for the intervention of international financial institutions, with one difference: the fund acts immediately. The international financial institutions take time to take their decisions. And so in many situations we have around the world, the fund was the first to come, and then that had a positive effect in facilitating the incoming action of the World Bank, other regional development banks, and the IMF that has now decided also to be particularly committed to the situation of fragile countries, as the World Bank already is. And so I do not see a peace-building commission as an alternative to those sources. I see it as a fundamental catalyst for international financial institutions and for the private sector to be involved. Now, the problem is everybody recognizes that it is very well managed, that has practically no bureaucratic costs, that is very quick, and that is very well accepted by all countries where it operates. But the truth is the fund has not enough funding for all the requests of member states in relation to the needs that exist in the world. So the fund is underfunded. And that is where my request for assessed contributions is, in my opinion, very important. Because we are not an NGO. We are an intergovernmental organization. And an intergovernmental organization, when one deals with the core of the activities of an intergovernmental organization, needs to have an intergovernmental contribution to the implementation of our activities. I mean, nobody questions that peacekeeping is to be funded by assessed contributions. Nobody questions that special political missions must be funded by assessed contributions. And so to have a component of assessed contributions will strengthen the fund and will also have a multiplying impact in relation to other sources of financing. And I'm very sorry, but and I understand the position of different member states. The member states say, okay, but let's look into alternatives. Well, let me give the example of my fiercest battle in relation to assessed contributions in the UN, the G5 Sahel. In the G5 Sahel, I always consider that for it to be effective, it needed to have a Chapter 7 mandate from the Security Council, to have assessed contributions with all the mechanisms of monitoring and accountability that would bring with it. It was said, no assessed contributions, no. There was opposition, namely from one very important member state, said, no, we'll find alternatives. And there is a mobilization, alternatives will be found, and the alternatives were not found, and the G5 Sahel had no resources. And then we have now in the 5 of G5 Sahel, 2 countries that have a coup d'etat, 1 country that has a transition that is complex, and the terrorist organizations are increasing their capacity and moving towards the countries of the coast. So, I mean, when we decide not to use assessed contributions, let's not have the illusion that all of a sudden there will be a miraculous way to replace it, because my experience is that when we ask for assessed contributions and there is no way to get them, it is very difficult to replace them. And so my appeal, and we are talking about $100 million US. I mean, we are not talking about the billions or the trillions that correspond to peacekeeping, billions or trillions that correspond to military expenditure in the world. We are speaking about 100 million US dollars that could have a multiplying effect in the funding of the peace building fund and the multiplying effect of the peace building in relation to the IFIs and to the private sector and to all the other sources that are already coming together when they see the peace building fund moving ahead quickly and effectively as the peace building fund is moving ahead. So my appeal is naturally for our work to be conducted, for all the different aspects of strengthening peace building to be put in the front line, but not, let's not pretend that if we do not have peace building assessed contributions, well, we'll find another way. With my experience, I can tell you it will be very difficult to find another way. The distinguished representative of Brazil asked a very important question. I think there is a clear link between sustainable development and social inclusion and stability and peace building. As a matter of fact, and with prevention. I mean, sustainable development, inclusive social inclusion and social stability are a central fact of prevention of conflict. And when we use peace building instruments, we are creating the conditions for countries to move from a situation of instability or conflict into sustainable development and inclusive and stable social relations. So I do think that there is a very clear interpillar connection here, and I do think that these objectives are perfectly complementary. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General, for sharing your priorities and expectations, and also reiterating your strong support for the Peacebuilding Commission and the relevance of its work more broadly within the United Nations and its principal organs and other institutions. And also, thank you for reiterating the need for upscaling support of the PBF. I hope, Mr. Secretary General, you are also carrying back a very strong message to the Peacebuilding Commission members for the urgent need for adequate, predictable, and sustained financing and their commitment to address that. We are happy that you also share the same sense of urgency that we heard this morning from the members here as we prepare for the much-awaited high-level meeting next month. And Mr. Secretary General, we greatly appreciate your leadership to ensure stable financing for the Commission, and thank you also for your specific proposals in this regard in your report, which merit consideration and further discussion. We look forward to your participation, Mr. Secretary General, at the high-level meeting on peace-building financing next month. Your presence there will be very important for sending a strong message, the right message to all member states on this important issue, to have an impactful and action-oriented outcome of the high-level meeting. Thank you once again for joining us, Mr. Secretary General, despite your busy schedule, and we shall remain engaged with you in the coming weeks. Excellencies, let us give 1 minute to the Secretary General to leave us. And again, a big thank you to the Secretary General before we finally wrap up the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Excellencies, I know that we had exhausted the list of speakers then, but does any other delegation wish to take the floor before we wrap up? And I would also like to give the floor to our Assistant Secretary General, Elizabeth Spiha, if she would like to make any additional comments.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I don't want to preempt any other member states who would like to add any further thoughts, but I'm ready to say a few things.
All right. When I don't think we haven't received any further request. Is it Osama? You wanted the floor again? Elizabeth, shall we take Ambassador Osama first, and I'll give you the floor the last, okay? The final important. Yes, Osama, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairperson, Ambassador Rabab. I mean, such a wonderful meeting and such a wonderful momentum and so on. We all speak the same language. We have all the reasons to be optimistic. We are on a very good standing to succeed and to prevail on the 28th of April. We have heard the Secretary General. He's fully supportive. Most of us are supportive. This is the smartest investment in the UN. I believe we have all the reasons to be confident, to move together and to go for the highest. The highest is to have a resolution, to keep pursuing what we want to pursue, is having access to that $100 million that is needed. This is what I wanted to say, that we should trust ourselves, we should not be hesitant, and we should not regress, we should progress. Thank you very much. With you as our boss, we will prevail.
Thank you very much for your passion and commitment. Message very well noted. Thank you very much. Does any other speaker wish to take the floor? I see none. Assistant Secretary General Elizabeth Spiha, the floor is yours, Madam Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I have to also thank you, as everyone has today, for this very timely meeting. I think it couldn't be more timely. We are, as many of the distinguished delegates have mentioned, we are less than 4 weeks now away from the high-level meeting. So the timing of this could not be more germane. And I think it was very useful. Of course, I was also very pleased that the Secretary General was able to accept your invitation. It clearly enriched the discussion tremendously. So I have to say, first of all, that speaking after the Secretary General and all of you is quite a hard act to follow, but I shall nonetheless perhaps add a few things, and also in relation to some of the, in particular in relation to some of the comments and questions that came up. I mean, I think we all realize, as several distinguished members of the PBC mentioned today, that we are in a very difficult fiscal environment. I mean, there's no question, and there are more and more needs. They are growing every day. But again, I think we just cannot afford not to put more resources in prevention and peace building. I mean, we simply can't afford it. And I thought that the distinguished representative of Bulgaria put it very, very beautifully when she said, I hope I'm quoting her accurately, no cost is too high for prevention. I think we just need to remind ourselves of that. I was very glad to hear the Secretary General indeed also address this issue of peace versus development. Of course, we do not see that at all as peace versus development, but rather peace and development being interlinked, intimately interlinked and mutually reinforcing. And indeed, the member states themselves made that very clear, because that is at the heart of one of the key points of the twin resolutions from 2016 on peace building and sustaining peace. So I don't think that frankly the question of more money going into peace building will detract from development. To the contrary, I can tell you that in terms of the peace building fund, one of the primary beneficiaries of that funding, in a catalytic way, as the Secretary General was mentioning, quick financing, is for UNDP to work on a number of peace building priorities of a developmental nature, if you will. So we do see this as truly a joined up approach, and that is the essence of peace building at its heart. In terms of there was a question on would there perhaps, if there's assessed funding, be a need for greater oversight and so forth. I can assure all of you that the Peace Building Fund does have a very robust accountability and monitoring mechanisms in place. And I would say that whether it's voluntary or assessed funding, these mechanisms will do their job. And we are very cognizant of the fact that we need to make sure that we keep a balance. And several distinguished members today have mentioned that. And that is a balance between flexible, responsive, quick, catalytic funding, and at the same time ensuring this accountability and monitoring of the resources. It has to be both at the same time: oversight, accountability, but maintaining the flexibility and responsiveness. And we believe that we can achieve that. I have to say that I very much welcomed the many points made by the majority of the distinguished members today, emphasizing the need for concrete outcomes of this 27 April meeting. Indeed, that's what member states again have themselves asked for, most recently in the 2020 outcome of the Peacebuilding Architecture Review, and again, the twin resolution. So you yourselves as member states have set the bar for having concrete action-oriented outcomes coming out of the high-level meeting of the General Assembly. So I would hope that you would all rise to that very important level of ambition. And I have no doubt that you will. I also heard from many of the members today, you were voicing, I could call it a sense of urgency, that it's too late, it's very late, we're only a few weeks away, can we pull it together? I would frankly say I think we cannot afford not to pull things together, because this is a unique opportunity. Many of you have mentioned that as well. These high-level meetings don't come up every day, and so certainly where there's a will, there's a way. And I would very much look forward to seeing the energy that I've heard today from all of you translate itself into some very concrete ideas on what these outcomes, these action-oriented outcomes, in fact, could be. One of the distinguished delegates was talking about the importance of strong consensus, and of course, I have no doubt that that is also achievable. There was a question on, well, what specifically could we do, or what should happen in terms of being able to move forward on the issue of assessed contributions? And I know that that is one of the trickier issues that the Secretary General has put forward to member states. Simply from where I sit and what I've seen, I think to have that seriously considered, the ideal scenario would be if the high-level meeting, or at the high-level meeting, member states could give a strong political signal that they are at least open to seriously considering this possibility, along with other options for financing for peace building. And then also ideally that could translate into a serious look at the SG's proposal, which he made for assessed contributions in a separate report at the Fifth Committee in its second resumed session. I think that would be the ideal. Now, whether that's achievable at this stage, this is up to member states. It's certainly not at all up to me. I also registered the very important points, so many of them, about local approaches to peace building, the important role, the critical role of women, of young people, and supporting local peace builders. These are issues that are absolutely critical for successful peace building on the ground. And it's our hope that these sorts of things will also be able to be discussed at the high-level meeting. In other words, how do we make sure that we can provide adequate support to local peace builders? And I wanted to mention to all of you that in agreement with the PGA, the PBSO will be organizing roundtables, 4 roundtables for the 25th of April, so just several days ahead of the high-level meeting. And one of the topics that we have suggested is precisely on local peace building and financing for local peace building. I'm hoping invitations will go out soon. And the idea is to have really substantive discussions on these sorts of issues that we would hope could feed directly into your deliberations on the 27th of April in the framework of the high-level meeting. The issue of international financial institutions, the Secretary General, I think, already covered that, so I won't say anything more, except that, of course, I fully agree with him and with the Canadian ambassador who mentioned it. We are getting better at forging these strategic relationships with the IFIs upstream and trying to reach a positive way and leveraging that. But there still is, of course, a lot more to do. And I think, again, the Peace Building Commission has a tremendous role in that regard. And I hope we will hear from more of the IFIs on their work in this area. In fact, I believe you all know that the IMF has, for the first time, come up with a strategy on how they are going to work more strategically in fragile and conflict-affected countries. And I think it would be terrific if Madam Chair, the PBC might extend an invitation to the IMF to explain their strategy. And that might be this quite new strategy, and that might be something that could be built upon in terms of further strengthening the relationship between the IMF and the work that the PBC is doing. There was a question on the experience on transitions, the transition project, and whether there can be more synergies generated between DCO, DPPA, and the other parts of the system, the development arm of the system, and so forth. I can simply say that this is one of our key priorities. And when I was recently discussing our work at PBSO with the Secretary General, one ask he had for me is to really redouble our efforts to bring the system together, to use peace building as a true hinge, including the resources of the Peace Building Fund, to bring the system together, to have better coherence across the pillars, particularly in the field where we need to deliver in a coordinated fashion coherently. For being able to help countries that are in crisis, that are in fragility, and in particular to help them deliver on the SDGs. And we know that the clock is very much ticking on the Sustainable Development Goals as well. And then finally, simply to say that there was a mention of national ownership. As you all know, I believe this is also a concept that's at the heart of our peace building work. The Peace Building Fund support is absolutely demand driven. And we do not move on using PBF resources in a country or in a region unless the highest authorities of the land have requested it, and in fact requested to be eligible for the PBF through a letter to our Secretary General. So truly this issue of national ownership and leading with national peace building priorities is of the highest order of priority for us. Thank you so much. I hope I haven't gone on too long, Madam Chair. And again, congratulations on a very successful meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much, AGSP, for your detailed responses to the comments made from the floor. And thank you also for sharing some details on the roundtables in preparation for the HLM. We need that information as soon as possible to ensure that we have good, meaningful participation also from our capitals. And I would like to take this opportunity. It was remiss on my part not to do that at the outset of the meeting, but to welcome you once again and to say how delighted we are to have you on board. And you can count on our full support. And on our part, we'll be continuing to count on your office's support and your support in the coming days. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, dear friends, we have come to the end of today's meeting, and I thank you all very much for your active and excellent participation today. I think the meeting went beyond our expectation today. Allow me to very briefly recap some of the main key takeaways from today's meeting. The report of the Secretary General, as well as his briefing today and discussions today, clearly state that the current financing for prevention and peace building remains inadequate given the increasing demand on the PBC for engagement. And as the Secretary General made amply clear, and we also heard from many speakers, prevention of conflicts and investing in building and sustaining peace is way more cost effective for member states than crisis response. We also have the Secretary General's concrete proposals on peace building financing, and we have heard reflections on that, very strong reflections on that this morning. And this is not the first time that he has made reflected on these proposals. But however, as the high-level meeting nears, it is very useful to hear today the renewed sense of urgency for action from everyone and from the SG about those proposals. And we have heard from many speakers today for an action-oriented, concrete outcome from the high-level meeting. We are currently working on the draft inputs that will be sent to the President of the General Assembly ahead of the high-level meeting. The draft is being negotiated at the experts level. Essentially, it is a compilation of the discussions that the Commission has had so far on the subject in recent years and months. And therefore, I would appeal to everyone to show flexibility and be constructive in finalizing the inputs as soon as possible, so that this could be shared with the PGA well ahead of the high-level meeting. And let us make our best efforts towards an impactful, action-oriented, concrete outcome of the high-level meeting. With those few words, thank you once again for being here today, and let's remain engaged. And with those few words, I declare close this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabab. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Rabab.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. It was a very
Goodbye,
good.
Rabab. Thanks, colleagues.
Thank you very much. Let's stay in touch. Huh? Thank you very much.
Inshallah. And Ramadan Kareem.
And Ramadan Kareem to everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.